Welcome everyone to the Healing Sexual Trauma Summit. I am Marcy Little, your host, and with me today we have Pamela Miles. Pamela, welcome.
Thank you so much, Marcy. I'm very happy to be here.
We're really honored to have you. Before we get started and I launch into telling you more about Pamela, Pamela is going to guide us in a centering practice. Or unless you would call it something different, Pamela, what would you call this?
The practice will definitely be centering, and I thought I would start us out with a short hands-on self-practice. So if anybody is Reiki trained, it becomes a Reiki self-practice, but even if you're not Reiki trained, having your hands on yourself passively is very comforting, and people love this, and we'll keep it short. It's a taster treat. So what I'm going to do, I'm just opening my timer here. What I'm going to do is place hands on the crown of my head, and then my chest, and then my abdomen. I usually do like this, but it totally doesn't matter. And if for any reason it's uncomfortable to get your hands to the crown of your head, you could do one hand, or you could go right to your heart. And so I'll watch the timer. I'll be keeping my eyes open. It's the hard part. But if you're someplace where it's comfortable for you to close your eyes and just rest back, go ahead and do that. Please, whatever you do, don't try to relax because, most of us are not so good at that, really. And also, you don't have to focus. You don't have to concentrate. You don't have to do any special breathing. You can actually just let your mind go out to pasture. Or if your mind feels problematic, then you can lightly pay attention to your breath, whatever makes you comfortable. Okay?
Okay.
Great. So then, without further ado, and let me make sure I have the sound off on this so you're not hearing a loud chime. Let's bring our hands to the crown of our heads and just let them rest there. And if you need to adjust them, or as I said, one hand at a time, that's perfectly fine. Bring your hands to your chest. And hands to your abdomen. Please keep your eyes closed just a few more moments and notice how you're feeling. Notice any small change in the way you feel now compared to how you felt when we started just a few minutes ago. And then keeping your eyes closed a little longer, let the state that you're in now expand to totally envelop your physical form. I want to make sure that you feel present in your body. You never know how deeply you might have dropped within, even in just a few moments. When you feel your body, then let your eyes slowly open, especially if you're in a room where there's a lot of light. Be gentle with your eyes. Be gentle with your nervous system.
Thank you, Pamela.
It's always my pleasure to practice.
I'll say that that felt very deeply soothing to me. And I started to feel it particularly when my hands came to my heart. And then when I put my hands on my belly, at first I felt a little dizzy, actually.
Mhm.
And then it softened and it just felt warm and good.
And that was a very short practice, really just a taster, but generally our hands feel comforting to us, and we forget about that, how much we can comfort ourselves with just a very light hand placement. And you never know how somebody is going to respond. I mean, I practice quite a bit longer than we just did, but every morning I've practiced since I learned to practice Reiki in 1986. And I start practicing before I even open my eyes, as I begin to have some awareness out of sleep. And I never know, each morning I never know how I'm going to respond. Other than that, it's a very comforting and optimistic way to guide myself into my day.
It's beautiful. And so everybody who just had the benefit of experiencing being guided by Pamela, and in a second I'm going to tell you more about Pamela, you can try it too. It's a lovely way to start your day. So Pamela Miles, here we go, is an internationally renowned Reiki master and the foremost pioneer introducing Reiki practice to conventional medicine. So you were in very good hands just a minute ago. In her 35 years of experience with this spiritual practice, she's collaborated on various projects with academic medical centers, including Yale, Harvard, and the National Institutes of Health. Pamela has been published in peer-reviewed medical journals, including the preeminent Journal of the American College of Cardiology. She's also brought her insight to corporate outlets such as Google and Unilever. Pamela's expertise in Reiki and integrative health has been featured in mainstream media, including The Dr. Oz Show, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox, The Atlantic, Forbes, US News and World Report, New York Magazine, Allure, and Self. Just have to take a moment there.
It sounds like I've been very busy, but remember, I've been doing this for a really long time.
Yeah, over the span of 35 years. So there's more. She's also the author of the award-winning Reiki, A Comprehensive Guide, the only Reiki book written for the mainstream public and healthcare professionals. And when she's not helping her private clients strengthen their health and well-being, she's championing Protect Reiki, her initiative to defend the public's freedom to practice Reiki as they choose. Pamela is a mother of 2 adult children and is based in New York City. And there you are. So one more welcome to you, Pamela.
Thank you.
Yeah, sort of sweet in a way, if you allowed yourself to be guided by Pamela, that you trusted that you were in good hands. And once you hear about her, it's uncontestable. All right. So Pamela, after hearing me read that bio about you, is there anything more you'd like our viewers to know about you?
You know, the part that people often don't realize is that I started meditating and practicing yoga when I was a kid, not because my family was into it, but because I had the interest. I always was very drawn to the interior. And so when I came to Reiki practice in 1986, I was already a meditation teacher. I'd been a student of meditation and yoga for almost 25 years at that point, and other spiritual practices. And that really gave me a very different context in which to receive and recognize Reiki practice. People often don't know that there are no standards for Reiki practice or education. And so when somebody says they practice Reiki, we honestly don't know what it is that they do. We need to ask them about it. And just for people to know that my perspective on Reiki is very traditional. I learned as Hawayo Takata taught. That's who brought the practice from Japan in the 1930s with her Japanese Reiki master's permission and active support. So I learned the practice when it was still very simple, before Americans started complicating it. And I love that it's so simple. You know, to me, that's a huge advantage, because contemporary life is usually not so simple. And I don't think I would have been able to practice on myself every single day, because I was a single mom raising 2 children. I was actually pregnant with my daughter when I learned to practice. So I had a pretty busy life and a lot of things pulling at me. And I know that even when maybe I didn't do things so well, I did them the best that I could, because I started my day with my Reiki self-practice, my spiritual self-care.
That's great. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so 25 years of yoga and meditation practice created a very strong foundation for the spiritual practice of Reiki. And you come from a lineage, your practice, and it's very simple. And sounds like the simplicity really served you, has served you from the start.
Absolutely. And that's what drew me to it because a friend of mine gave me a treatment. She had just learned the first degree practice a couple weeks before, and she thought I might like it. And she also knew that, I was in my first trimester pregnancy blahs, very thrilled to be pregnant again, but also feeling very tired, borderline nauseated most of the time. And when she placed her hands on my head, I quickly started having experiences and sensations with which I was very familiar from my other spiritual practices and other forays into natural healing approaches. And what I liked about this was that the response was very fast, faster than anything I'd ever experienced. I would say faster than anything that doesn't involve a needle. And um, and that it was very effective. I didn't have to sit and meditate for 30 minutes before I started noticing something. It was within moments.
So how would you, what's going on that it makes it so fast? Like, what is Reiki?
Well, Reiki is a spiritual practice that supports balance throughout our system. And I usually speak about it from a physiologic basis, not because I think that's the only thing that's happening, but because we all agree we have bodies, right? So we might as well start with where we feel overlap. And also because a lot of us, whether or not we're healing sexual trauma, a lot of us are less than thrilled with the bodies we're in at any given moment. And so the light touch that's involved, which is, I think, unique to Reiki practice, helps us to bridge that gap we sometimes imagine exists between what's spiritual and what's physical. Even though we may use terms like mind, body, spirit, mostly we don't get it. It doesn't.
And we're one entity. It's like it's all one ultimately.
Yes, it's just different facets of the same being. And we can access and interrelate with ourselves in many different ways. But the spiritual aspect is the big bucket. It's the bucket that holds all the other buckets. And it's the bucket that we put all of the miscellaneous in, all the stuff we don't understand, because our spiritual selves, that's the mystery. So we can't reduce it to equations. We can't be formulaic about it. And that's why every time we practice, we don't know what our response is going to be, because we're not driving something. We're rather evoking or eliciting gently a self-healing response from deep within the system. It's like a remembered wellness. It's an invitation to our systems to restore balance. And it seems to bring a sense of comfort. That's a word that I hear a lot: comfort, safety. People will say something like, wow, I didn't realize how off my game I was, because we get used to coping and we think it's normal and we think there's no cost for it. And neither of those things are true. And then, our own hands can remind us, oh yeah, this is who I am. This is what's real. This is the starting point. I'm exhausted because I've been functioning, just skimming the surface. And now I'm remembering my roots, like that beautiful lotus, that the roots go deep. It's not just that exquisite flower that floats on the top of a sometimes very muddy pond.
I have a shirt that says no mud, no lotus.
Right.
Yeah.
And so spiritual practice helps us to appreciate that instead of demonizing ourselves and others, or, speaking horribly about our egos, for example, or somebody else's ego. I mean, our egos also want to do a good job.
Oh.
We can be a little kinder, to ourselves and to our egos, and engage them in a way that is helpful, because our ego is like our psychospiritual spine. We, as I see it, as my spiritual experience, is that within us, deep within our heart of hearts, there's one heart, there's oneness, and then that oneness is expressing as all these amazing individuals. And we get so caught up in being an individual and all our responsibilities and such, and we forget the roots. So spiritual practice enables us to live as individuals responsible for our choices, but informed by the experience of oneness. So there's space for forgiveness, there's space for mercy, there's space for justice, and there is a natural sense of timing for what is possible right this moment. So we can strive without faulting ourselves all the time.
I love what you're saying, Pamela. And it hits me in a place where I practice myself. And I'm also a yoga teacher, and I teach in the Anusara yoga tradition, and anybody who's listening who's familiar is going to know what I'm about to say. And it's based on a set of universal principles of alignment. And the first principle is, I think, aligns with what you're talking about right now, and it's opening to grace. And it's just where we start.
Yes, and it kind of boils down to the glass half empty, the glass half full. It's all arbitrary, but you get to make the choice. And why wouldn't you choose to start by opening to grace? Why not choose the perspective that the glass is half full? There's the same amount of water in the glass.
Yeah, so that's like a shift in mindset, really, in a way, is what you're talking about there.
Very much a shift in perspective from the individual that is always, a little fearful when it's totally into being an individual, a little fearful, and there's not enough. There's never enough. Somebody else might want what I want, might get there first, like that kind of struggle instead of striving. And when we strive and we come from the spiritual perspective of oneness, there's no such thing as not enough oneness. There's only one, and we're all part of it. So it in Ayurveda, there's a saying, well begun, half done. Or Abraham Lincoln, didn't he say something about, like, if I had an hour to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first half hour sharpening my axe. So, getting yourself aligned, getting prepared, gathering your tools if there are tools that you need. And with spiritual practice, and with Reiki practice in particular, this inner alignment happens automatically. We place our hands, we're not pushing, we're not making something happening, it's an offering. We place our hands, and something, and this is the mystery of spiritual practice, some part of us says, oh yeah,
I remember this.
Yeah, I remember. And we start pulsing from that vibration of remembered wellness and oneness, instead of never measuring up or having been violated. And the importance of experiencing the oneness is that oneness, that is the timeless part of ourselves that cannot be violated. So it gives us a nest of comfort and safety in which our nervous system lets down spontaneously. We move out of this stressed state into a more balanced parasympathetic state in which we are able to self-heal. So without a sense of safety, self-healing is not really possible. So we live in a time in which medicine has been divorced from spirituality. This is the first time we know of this happening. It's not going so well, right?
Not so well. Yeah.
So Reiki practice can bring spirituality back into our self-care and our medical health care without getting in the way. And I've seen people recover from trauma after trying for a long time and not being able to make a significant difference. And then they sleep through the night. Or maybe it takes them a few days and then they sleep through the night. Sometimes for the first time in 20 years.
Wow. Yeah. After developing a self Reiki practice, you mean? Is that what you mean?
Or coming for a Reiki treatment.
Yeah.
I have presented, given a Reiki presentation to many victim groups, people who have been traumatized in one way or another through crime or we don't need to detail, and whereas usually when I'm presenting Reiki, I'll make sure everybody has a felt hands-on experience. I'll bring some colleagues or students of mine if necessary, depending on the size of the group. But with people who have trauma, I don't assume, I never assume, they always can say no thank you, quietly, privately. But I tell the trauma groups that what we're going to do is place our hand above your head. Mm-hmm. That normally, usually in other circumstances, I would actually rest my hand on your head. But in this case, I'm going to float my hand. And if you want touch, just grab my wrist and bring my hand down. Now, certainly there have been some people in the groups who, when we came to them, they just let us know that they don't want to have any experience directly, and that's fine. But of the ones who were interested, they always drew my hand down. And sometimes even in situations in which the social worker who organized the event assured me that not happen. Yeah, no, you don't understand. This group is very traumatized. They're not open to any kind of touch. And I was always like, it's fine. I'm not trying to convince anybody, but let's give people the option.
Let's see what happens, because the mystery is here at all times.
And let's give people choice, because making assumptions, withholding the opportunity for choice, I feel furthers the trauma. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's infantilizing. No, dear, we made this decision for you because you're not up to it.
Right.
How is somebody supposed to grow into their fullness and their sense of agency when they're being addressed like that, when they're being seen like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I love everything you're saying. And I'm sure our viewers do too. So why is self-care imperative in the healing of trauma? I feel like we have been talking about that. Is there anything more that you want to say about that?
It's not just in the healing of trauma. Self-care is what makes anything sustainable. There is no sustainability without self-care. So when we take care of ourselves, we're doing what only we can do. no one else can do my self-care for me.
Mhm.
And with Reiki self-care, it's so simple. And seriously, most people practice in bed, either in the morning or at night. And our self-care is empowering because we're meeting our responsibilities, you know? And when I take care of myself, then it's easier for me to receive care from others. And it's also easier for me to say, no, I don't want that. Or this is how I want it to be. This is what would make me comfortable. Because our self-care creates that foundation of comfort and safety within us, such that we feel empowered to be able to give important information and take responsibility. Let it be communicated what works for me.
And how different would the world look if people were doing their self-care?
Well, I think I'm hoping we get a chance to find that out. I mean, I've been on a daily self-Reiki mission for decades because it seems most people who have some kind of Reiki training have not been taught to practice on themselves. It's more like this is something we do for others. And that's a shame, because nobody can do it for us in the same way. And receiving Reiki treatment from someone else is wonderful. Even with a strong self Reiki practice, I still get together with friends and we practice on one another. I call it a Reiki social. One of us is on the table and the other two or three are laying hands and we take turns. Because when somebody else takes care of you, there's another element of being cared for.
Yeah.
But if we haven't cared for ourselves, it's less likely that we'll be able to welcome that care.
Right. Take it in. Yeah.
Yeah. We have to feel safe. So we make ourselves safe first. We have to feel worthy.
Mhm.
And again,
That's
that's a
a big one.
spiritual issue. Yeah.
Yeah. It is a spiritual issue. I like to call it that. I like that you're calling it that. Yeah.
There may be psychological components. There may be things to talk through, but it is primarily a spiritual issue. And we're the only ones who can address that. I value myself and I value my practice enough that I meet myself and my practice every day without fail.
Yes. Do you want to speak a little bit about subtle boundaries and honoring your boundaries? We've talked about that also a little bit in terms of having choice, but is there more you'd like to say about that, Pamela?
Yes, I encourage people to ask themselves a very important question. This is radical. Ask yourself, what do I want? Before you say yes or no, before you agree, before you let yourself be intimidated or you intimidate yourself, just pause and ask, what do I want? And sometimes we know exactly what we want. And sometimes we don't know what we want until somebody else orders. Then we know,
Like, wait a second.
I don't want that.
Really want the fish.
Yeah. So, like we said, oh, I'm happy to go to any restaurant you want. They say, okay, let's go for Chinese. And then you're like,
No
no, I
way.
don't want Chinese. Like we literally don't know it until we have something to play off from. And that's okay. If that's the way we recognize what we want,
Yeah.
and it can be helpful if we say things like, yeah, that part where I said, I don't care where we go. I just realized I do care. I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
So asking what I want helps me not only to validate what I want or what I don't want, maybe that's as far as we know in that moment, but also can empower us to be playful about communicating it. Because people often feel like they have to set boundaries.
Especially when boundaries have been violated. Then I think I know this in myself historically, not so much anymore, thank goodness. They soften, but it was like pendulum swing, and I see it in people I know. It's like, I've got to set this and it's got to be hard, you know?
Yeah, and they're reacting, they're not creating.
Right.
No. So when that nervous system shift happens that we talk about, and we're in a parasympathetic dominant state, then we're in our creativity. We're in our playfulness, you know, and we can say no and reject an offer, but not reject the person. Thank you so much for thinking of me. That's not what I want to do right now, but I really appreciate you offering it to me.
Yeah.
So we're not setting a boundary like a line in the sand, you know, which starts a war and comes from a reactive position, but rather we're recognizing our boundaries. Our boundaries are already there, and often we're the only ones who don't know it. You know, the person who is pushing us is very aware, often, not always, that they're pushing against us. Certainly a bully is, you know? And then sometimes friends are just unconscious and they don't mean to, but
Yeah.
we know the difference. And that's the point I want to underscore, is that we know the difference. And when we have a daily self-care practice, such as a daily self-Reiki practice, we are more aware of the difference. And because we feel safer, we're more trusting of our assessment without it having to make sense.
I like that part. It doesn't need to make sense.
You just trust your sense of where you are. And that's why being embodied is so helpful, because our bodies have very clear boundaries. So if my body is here, but I'm like out here somewhere, you know, because I'm frightened and I'm dissociating, it's harder to know. So we practice. And then as we practice, our system moves into alignment with itself. And when we're aligned with ourselves, we're aligned with all that is. You know, that's how we create harmonious relationships. And in a harmonious relationship, we get to say no.
Even to that part of ourself that wants to push us in a direction that's not working.
Yeah. Because when we feel safe, we're able to see the parts of us that, you know, maybe we're not so proud of, or we've judged harshly, or we've pretended didn't exist, and realize we're human. We're not going to be proud of every single decision we've made in our lives. That doesn't mean we can't start making choices that we're proud of and that are sustainable.
Pamela, thank you. I think this may be a good place for us to start to wrap up. Is there anything lingering that you want our viewers to know before we move towards closing our conversation?
No, I think we had a pretty good chunk here.
It was a good chunk. Good chunk. So to the viewers who are here, Pamela has a few things to offer you. Pamela, do you want to tell our viewers about that?
Sure. The first is, I want you to know that twice a week, I've been leading hands-on self-practice sessions like what we started with, but longer. And everybody is welcome to join that. They're online, and it's a webinar set up so you're not seen. You're totally on your own. It's completely private, and You can practice in the way you were taught if you were taught, or you can follow along with how I'm practicing if you need that guidance. And I started it the day before the World Health Organization declared the pandemic, seeing
But timing.
yeah, well, I saw what was coming, and I knew people were going to be frightened and isolated, and that's a terrible combination in terms of immunity. So
Yes.
I first was thinking of the global Reiki community, but very quickly people started showing up. I mean, I stopped counting at 25,000 registrations within the first months.
Ooh, I just got a chill.
And some of those people didn't have any training. And I remember what happened when I published my book. People started coming to my Reiki classes and saying that they started practicing Reiki from my book. And they were so excited. They said they'd been practicing every day since they read the book, and they were so happy.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to dampen their enthusiasm, but I was also wondering, did you read the part in the book where it says you can't learn how to practice Reiki from a book? I never asked that question because I didn't want to risk it, but what unfolded and what took me a little while to understand was that people were getting value from taking time for themselves, from their self-touch, and then when they took the training and learned more, their practice and their benefits from it expanded. So when that started happening, having experienced that in my own teaching, when the same thing started happening with the global self-practice sessions, I was totally confident, that people would get benefit. And some people have been practicing with us for, what's it been, almost a year and a half now, and have no interest in learning to practice. And, a few have decided to learn to practice. So it's really, to make a short story long, right? It's really that you can practice in your home where you feel safe on your terms.
Great.
Nothing is asked of you. So
Wonderful.
that's the first thing, and that's for everybody and your buddies and your families. And the other is that a good year, more than a year before the pandemic started, I started offering traditional Reiki training online to small groups. We're on like this, we see each other. It's interactive. We start practicing on ourselves within usually the first hour. We meet 3 times over a week, so people are really supported in setting up their home practice. And of course, when the pandemic started, I was so happy that I had followed my intuition to start doing that, which I started because I hear from so many people who want to come and study with me and can't get to New York City, or they have young children and it's hard for them to get out of the house. People have lots of reasons, or they're housebound, or they're in hospitals. So what I've seen is that the people who do those trainings are as engaged in their self-care as the people who used to come and be in the classes in person, and that I'm very happy for and very proud of. And then the other thing is an online interactive program that I lead maybe once a year called Blessed Boundaries. And people do some meditation or Reiki practice, and that followed by some free writing from their heart. We have some instructions for everybody, but every day for 2 weeks, they get a prompt that they write from. And the idea is to develop a sense of safety within yourself so that you can recognize your boundaries. And at the same time, there's, some teaching articles that I write specifically for that program to help people develop skills like what I said before. You reject the offer, not the person.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. I want to remind viewers that if you're here watching this video for the next 48 hours, it's free. If you think you're going to want to come back and listen to Pamela's wisdom again sometime in the future, and you'd like to have this and other videos from this Healing Sexual Trauma Summit series in your private collection for forever, hit the buy button now while it's quite affordable. And hopefully you'll be glad you did. I am delighted to have you here, Pamela. I know that we had talked about you giving us a blessing to end our talk today. And would you like to still do that?
Yes, I'm always very happy to do that. And you can call it a blessing, you could call it a healing. People can conceptualize it as they like. But I also want to be clear that if you don't like, all you have to do is say no inwardly, you know, because this is an offering. It's not a dart that's coming at you. It's just an offering, and your system will respond to it or not. And we'll just take a few minutes. You don't have to do anything to be more receptive or anything like that. Just sit comfortably, and if it's okay with you, close your eyes. And if you need something to engage your attention with, then lightly follow your breath. Not focusing, not concentrating, just noticing the cycle of the breath as it moves effortlessly in and out of your body, giving it to your body to breathe. Remembering that none of us are alive today because we remembered to breathe. That's what our body is good at. And then we'll just be quiet briefly. And it's always a good idea to linger in your state briefly, not to abruptly open your eyes, but just notice how it feels to be you right now. And as the day unfolds, you might want to notice how the rest of your day goes, because the evidence of healing can show up anywhere. People notice it in different ways. And then whenever you're ready, when you feel your body, might wiggle your fingers and toes, make sure they're where you left them, where you remember them being, and then let your eyes gently open.
Thank you, Pamela Miles.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.